Okay, there might be some spoilers for these movies in this video, so go away if you don't want to hear those.
This leader is provided to permit the projectionist to complete adjustment of focus and sound level before the film begins.
I don't watch trailers. In fact, I actively avoid them and think they ruin the final product they're advertising. Wow, bold claim! You're a terrible person! Go back to your editing dungeon! Editing scum? Let me explain. I think trailers are the sin of modern-day viewing experience for two main reasons that I will explain over the course of this video. Number one, they spoil things about the final product, and number two, they set up unintended expectations. Let's get started. Now, before I get into the big opinion throwdown of today, I think it's important that we look at why trailers exist and how they came into being in the first place. This way we can understand their place in the modern market better. The first form of trailer was made in 1913 for a musical called Pleasure Seekers and was played between movies at the Marcus Loew chain of theaters. Now, I couldn't find a version of this trailer to show, but from what I can tell, it was a short film consisting of rehearsal footage for the play. The important bit here is that the trailer was made simply to advertise the musical, to sell people on going to see it. And this is probably not surprising to you. Trailers are used as marketing for movies? To advertise a final product to an audience? Wow! What a novel concept! Sure, the intention of trailers hasn't changed from then to today, but the methodology of them certainly has. The earliest versions of trailers usually advertise their movies by a stentorian voice telling you who's in the movie, who's made it, and maybe sometimes vaguely describing the characters.
From the proudest page in frontier history, Edward Small presents its most heroic adventure, filmed in its full power and glory. The deathless story of the finest of them all, Davy Crockett, Indian Scout. Here they come!
Take the trailer for The Jazz Singer, the first ever feature with sound. It essentially boils down to 7 minutes of this guy telling you how excited he is to show you this upcoming marvel that has an all-star cast and has been received well by those who have seen it. Is it a good trailer? God no. But it is an example of how trailers were at the time. Just a guy telling you some stuff about the movie. This more meta form of trailer production continued up until the 60s, when trailers changed, I think, for the better. Where trailers were once slow and informative about cast and crew, they were now more focused on piquing your interest with a montage of clips from the movie thrown together. The trailer for 1964's Dr. Strangelove is an early and great example of this. The first half of the trailer is actually quite similar to what a lot of trailers do today, a lot of questions presented in text followed by answer cuts. We see less text nowadays, but that feeling of spontaneity can definitely be felt in today's trailers when it tonally makes sense. A lot of comedies do this, for instance. Now, this isn't to say that all trailers conform to this change. 1977's Close Encounters of the Third Kind's trailer is very indicative of its earlier ancestors. The trailer is 4 minutes of a narrator telling you who made the movie, who's in the movie, and what the movie is about. A lot of it is actually dedicated to forcing the meaning behind the title down your throat, which I find a bit funny. The narrator's speech is spliced with clips from the film that, I think, show a bit too much. I mean, this right here is basically the final shot of the whole movie. Sure, watching the trailer you don't know that, but still. I'm getting ahead of myself. Either way, the main difference between the trailers of then and the trailers of now are in the presentation. It is very rare that a trailer released today would have a narrator or even tell you who's in the film, unless that's a massive selling point and isn't inherently obvious, like in a lot of animated movies, or even comedies sometimes. Trailers today usually follow the montage style set up by trailers like that of 1962's Lolita or the aforementioned Dr. Strangelove. Where this gets messy is when the trailers take the montage approach too far and start to show too much. I have a weird relationship with the concept of a premise or an elevator pitch. I don't want to know anything about a movie going into it. Because of this, what I consider a spoiler is a bit skewed from the average. Take the trailer for Us. It reveals the Tethered, the evil doppelgangers of the movie's protagonists, about halfway through, and then shows a montage of clips of them chasing the main family. It does an effective job of selling its premise without showing too much. I saw Us completely blind, and personally don't like the trailer because it reveals that the Tethered are, in fact, doppelgangers of the main characters. I would have preferred if this had remained a mystery. The shock of finding out that the Tethered were doppelgangers along with the main characters was fantastic, and something that I only would have experienced in the theater had I not watched any trailers, which I didn't. However, I do recognize that this is simply the premise, and I'm probably asking for too much here. I'm not trying to say my opinion is invalid or anything, I just want to illustrate how bad my aversion to spoilers is before we talk about them more. I just prefer going in blind. Objectively though, I think I can tell when a trailer is showing too much. let's look at the first trailer for a far different movie, Avengers: Infinity War. In it, we mostly see clips from the Battle of Wakanda, which is in the third act of the movie. Now, I don't want to be bold here, but a whole shit ton happens in those first 2 acts that you could easily make a trailer out of without spoiling the big set pieces of the climactic battles. I get that they were trying to sell the war part of Infinity War here, but surely there's a way less obvious way of doing that. The first 10 minutes of Infinity War would have been quite possibly the most enticing trailer for a movie I'd have ever seen if it were released as one. Also, it sets up the premise perfectly. Thanos is closer to his goal than ever and is heading to Earth. That's all you need to know, and that's all you need to see. And yes, the reason they probably didn't show much from this part of the film in the initial trailers was to avoid spoiling the end of Thor Ragnarok, which was still in theaters at the time, but isn't that exactly my point? For another, actually real example of the type of trailer I'm asking for here, look no further than Infinity War's sequel, Avengers Endgame. The first trailer for this movie is one of my favorites. In it, only 3 scenes from after the 5-year time jump are shown. That's it. Not only did the studio have enough confidence in the first bit of the movie to make the first trailer out of it, but it had the added effect of making the time jump super effective for those who only watched this specific trailer. That includes me. And yeah, the later trailers and TV spots and other garbage showed more about the movie, but let's just pretend those never happened, and marvel at what a wonderful advertisement this first trailer is. Endgame's first trailer succeeds in where Infinity Wars failed in the same way that Us's is acceptable. I'd now like to slightly pivot to a little personal story that I have with the movie Ant-Man. Like I said, slightly pivot, still talking about the MCU here. I swear, I've seen more movies. Anyway, back in 2015, I was lucky enough to see a slightly early screening of Ant-Man by about 2 weeks. I really enjoyed it and was pleasantly surprised by the small cameo the Falcon had in the film. Weeks pass, and I open Twitter to see this.
This Friday.
There was this dude looking for you. He works for the Avengers. Oh, shh.
I'm a big fan.
Who the hell are you?
I'm Ant-Man.
Marvel's Ant-Man. Ant-Man?
Iron Man was taken.
Rated PG-13. Friday.
Whose fucking idea was this? Falcon's cameo is intended to be a fun surprise for fans of the MCU in a movie that was largely advertised to not have huge connections. Is the Falcon really the Avengers cameo that's gonna sell people on going to see Ant-Man if they hadn't already made their mind up? The unexpected cameo of Falcon is sold in the movie by just that, its unexpectedness. I feel like if someone told me ahead of time that Falcon had a cameo in Ant-Man, or even showed me that TV spot, I would assume he had a much bigger role in the film, or would be distracted the whole time waiting for him to show up. It's the same thing when you watch a trailer over and over and over again, and you go to a movie and you're like, where's that scene? And it's like at the end of the movie, you're waiting for that scene the whole time. It's distracting. Do you ever wonder why Falcon isn't in most of the marketing like Hulk is for Thor Ragnarok? Well, probably not. But the answer is because he's not a main fucking character in the movie! Man, Martin Scorsese's got a point. And let's talk about Thor Ragnarok for a second, because segues. Like I mentioned, the Hulk is a main character in the Thor film and is featured heavily in its marketing. You can honestly make an argument for this as a negative, a spoiler for the upcoming movie, but ultimately he's so prominent in the film and is introduced so early on that there's really no point in trying to hide him. He's also really big, so it would be difficult. Now, I don't see the Hulk being in the marketing of Ragnarok as a bad thing, because of how large a presence he has in the movie, but I probably would have enjoyed the film more if Hulk was a complete and utter surprise. Look at how caught off guard and excited Thor is here. That could have been us. But trailers. Like I mentioned with Us earlier, I had no idea going in that the Tethered were doppelgangers of the main characters, or even that the Tethered were a thing to begin with. All I knew was that it was a new horror film by Jordan Peele, and because of his previous film Get Out, I was sold. Yeah, I blindly trusted a name attached to a movie, which doesn't always work out. Looking at you, 2019 Twilight Zone, but it was a risk I was willing to take because of trust, I guess. Look, we're not here to dissect when you should and shouldn't give money to a thing based on a name attached to it. The point is, my lack of knowledge of Us made the movie better, or at least more fun, in my eyes. And Us isn't the only movie I can remember that this happened with. When I first watched The Fast and the Furious, I had no idea that the main character, Brian, was an undercover cop. I learned this when the movie showed me, during its midpoint, about halfway through. The revelation is supposed to be a revelation, it's a midpoint. That's the entire point, and the trailers ruin that. I genuinely believed that Brian was what he appeared to be, a street racer with delusions of grandeur who likes bad sandwiches. And he does turn out to actually be all of that, but also a scrappy undercover cop, which completely recontextualizes the earlier scenes and makes the movie far more interesting. You could argue that knowing Brian as a cop from the beginning allows you to understand his motivations better and makes the film more enjoyable, and honestly, in this specific case, I would agree, but this does bring up a larger discussion about spoilers. Can knowing certain things, or everything, about a movie better your experience with it? Yes, absolutely. But, and I cannot stress this enough, that is an experience you can have literally any time after watching the movie for the first time blind. An experience you can only have once, for the first time, is seeing it without knowing anything. Sure, watching Pulp Fiction and knowing where every plotline intersects and fits into one another is great and all, but that doesn't discount the experience of watching it blind. Just because one experience could be better than the other doesn't mean you should rob a person of that potentially lesser experience to begin with. It's like telling someone the answer to a riddle before you ask it. Like, fuck off, man. Let me figure it out for myself. It's hot in this fucking closet. Something weird that trailers are doing these days is essentially creating fake spoilers to allow themselves to show clips from parts in the movie that would otherwise be showing too much. In the first Infinity War trailer that I mentioned earlier, we see this scene. Notice something odd here? Is this big green boy. He ain't there in the final version! There's a whole conversation to be had about trailers like these being false advertising to an extent, which I kinda think they are, but we're not doing that today. What's more interesting about this is the expectations that these trailers create. Let's get back to the production side of trailers for a bit here. For those that don't know, common practice in big ol' Hollywood is to outsource your trailer production to a company completely detached from the core team behind the movie, / the studio in general. The important thing to note here is that the director, writer, editor, etc., all the main visionaries behind the film usually have zero involvement in what gets shown in a trailer and, more importantly, the context it's shown in. Editing is an extremely powerful storytelling tool. I should know. I do it for a living. The editing in your film, trailer, YouTube video, whatever, can drastically change the final product. The irritating part about having a separate production house cut a trailer for your movie without notes from the film's creatives is that they could completely misunderstand the tone, message, or look that you're trying to go for. There's a million examples of this in modern trailer making. Booksmart, for example, was a movie I had zero interest in upon watching its first trailer. It looked like a quick run-of-the-mill high school comedy that I would watch on Netflix at 3 a.m. and chuckle a couple times while being annoyed at the rest. What I got, upon finally watching Booksmart, however, was a wonderful coming-of-age story that takes the genre of high school comedy and flips it on its head in so many brilliant ways. Not only did the trailer deliver a completely different tone than the final product did, it actively turned me off from watching the movie. The only reason I ended up checking out Booksmart was because I saw it was getting fantastic reviews, and I assumed it was a mistake. You could argue this is on me, judging a book by its cover, a movie by its trailer, but I think this is a bit of a straw man. If the trailer for Booksmart, and many more like it, correctly delivered the tone of the final product, I wouldn't have waited so long to watch it, or, in the worst case scenario, completely written it off as something trivial. And this isn't one-sided. Trailers can absolutely deliver an extremely positive reaction, only to be disappointed upon viewing the final product. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is a movie from 2013 that I thought was going to be a quiet adventure of the protagonist finding some sense of self in an idyllic life. What I got, however, was far more bombastic and loud than the trailer had led me to believe. More blockbuster than indie sleeper. Not to mention, the trailer basically tells you the entire plot of the movie, but we're not in the spoiler section anymore. Oh, and I'm not commenting on the quality of Walter Mitty here, I'm simply saying how my expectations were warped due to a trailer being cut with a completely different tone in mind. Speaking of, Iron Man 3, and quite frankly most action blockbusters these days, suffers from this very issue. Its trailer is dark, it's depressing, it delivers this sense of hopelessness that promised something that we hadn't really seen in the MCU up to this point. I remember back when I first watched this trailer, I was pumped for a darker, edgier MCU film. Something that relied less on the quips and focused more on the character. Iron Man 3, love it or hate it, has the typical MCU quippy flair. It absolutely does have the underlying dark themes, mainly dealing with Tony's PTSD, but they're not the main spotlight. Iron Man 3 is an action movie romp that its trailer thinks is a psychological thriller. People aren't generally annoyed by these issues. If a trailer sells them on a movie, they'll go see it. If the movie was good, great. Trailer did its job. If the movie was bad, well, maybe they'll be miffed for a couple days, but ultimately no one's gonna write the trailer house a stern email asking for their 3 minutes back. Studios do take notice of reactions to their trailers, though. This has never been more apparent than with Suicide Squad. For some context, Suicide Squad came out hot off the heels of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, 2 movies that were heavily criticized for their overly dark tones. When Suicide Squad was being filmed, that was still the game plan for the DCU. Everything should look, sound, and feel like Zack Snyder's wet nightmare. This is evident in Suicide Squad's teaser. It's as dark and gritty as the DCU had been thus far. Because of this, people started to complain. More of the same and all that. Enter the first official trailer. This trailer is poppy, fun, zany. It borderline feels like an MCU film here, which is no accident. It was a response from Warner Brothers to the criticism from fans. They had this trailer edited, no doubt, with heavy notes to make it look far more fun and upbeat than the teaser showed. This went over incredibly well. People fucking loved this trailer, and for good reason. On its own, it is a great trailer. Warner Brothers was so thrilled with the reactions to this trailer, in fact, that they had Trailer Park, the production house behind the thing, re-edit the entire movie one last time before the final release. Whether Warner Brothers called for the re-edit to avoid complaints about the trailer not matching the final product, or if it was because they thought it would genuinely make a better movie, is irrelevant. The point is that the expectations set up by the trailer were so strong that it warranted an entirely new cut of the film be ordered. At the end of the day, trailers are fucking confusing. I know I'm probably in the minority here, especially when it comes to my relationship with spoilers, but I do genuinely believe that going into films blind, or at the very least with minimal knowledge, will improve your viewing of said films. I have an avid love and fascination for movies, so to see them sometimes ruined or have some of the best parts of them spoiled out of context by a trailer is disheartening. One of the best experiences I've ever had in a theater was while watching Captain America: The Winter Soldier for the first time. Now, I can't remember if I had seen any trailers beforehand, but if I did, it didn't matter, because they didn't spoil the big twist of the film. Hydra had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and had been festering inside the organization for years. I learned this along with Steve and Nat, and was just as caught off guard as they were. A fantastic reveal that would have been absolutely tarnished by a bombastic trailer boasting the betrayal of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s top members to Hydra, or whatever. I implore you to stop watching trailers, or at least only watch the first teaser if you really can't help yourself. I promise, it'll make your first viewing that much sweeter. Or you can tell me to shove it, because trailers are art that stand on their own just as much as the final product, and you just want to get back to speculating with the boys. That's fine too. You're valid. Just don't tell me anything you saw until I see the movie for myself. So those are my thoughts on trailers and shit. Let me know what you think. I'm probably a crazy person. I even go so far as to close my eyes and plug my ears when certain trailers come on before movies in a theater. I'm fucking nuts. There's something wrong with me. Put me in an asylum. Anyway, be sure to tweet this video at me in 5 years when I edit trailers for a living. Bye.